The sun hung over the prairie like a molten coin, burning the earth with its steady glare. All along the splintered bones of the abandoned station, weeds rattled in the dry wind, and the air carried the hollow loneliness of a place forgotten by men. The tracks stretched like rusted veins into nowhere, their iron tongues gone mute without trains to carry their weight. There, upon the warped planks of the platform, lay a young woman whose strength had been bled away by hunger and despair. Abigail had not eaten in 3 days, and her lips were cracked with thirst. Dust clung to her lashes, and her hair hung heavy with neglect. Her dress was torn at the hem where it had snagged against splinters in the night, and her fingers were weakly curled against her chest as though even her hands had given up hope of grasping anything more in this world. The faint tremor of hooves touched her ears before she lifted her head. For a moment, she thought it was her imagination, the cruel trick of a mind searching for salvation that would never arrive. But then the sound grew steadier, like a heartbeat returning to life. She turned her cheek against the hot boards and saw through a haze the shape of a rider cresting the rise. A man on horseback, broad in the shoulders, steady in the saddle, approached with the sun at his back so that his shadow fell long before him. She blinked, too weak to rise, too proud to cry for help, her body caught between desperation and the last tattered threads of dignity. The horse slowed, dust curling around its legs. The man swung down, his boots thudding softly on the boards. He was dressed in the worn leather of a working cowboy, hat pulled low, dust clinging to his shirt. His eyes were steady, blue as the far-off sky, carrying the patience of someone who had seen hardship and did not flinch from it. He crouched near her, resting his weight on one knee, and his shadow covered her face as though he offered shade against the unrelenting sun. Without asking permission, he uncorked his canteen and held it to her lips. Abigail turned her head weakly aside. Pride, that last brittle bone, would not allow her to appear like a beggar. "I don't need it," she whispered, her voice no stronger than the dry whisper of grass. "You'll drink," the man replied quietly, his voice deep, carrying neither pity nor command but something steady in between. "Else you won't last another hour." She shut her eyes. His words were not cruel, but they left no room for her false armor. Her throat burned, her stomach twisted with emptiness, and when the metal brushed her lips again, she yielded. Water ran over her tongue, and she nearly choked on it, the shock of life too sudden. He steadied her, one roughened hand behind her neck, patient as though he had done this for a wounded colt before. She coughed, then drank again, greedier now, and when he drew the canteen away, tears stung her eyes, not only for the water but for the kindness in the act. "Papa," a small voice said, sweet as a bell through the heavy heat. "Is she gonna be all right?" Abigail's blurred gaze shifted. From the horse, a little girl peered down at her. She could not have been more than 5, with hair the color of late summer wheat and eyes wide with worry. She clutched a rag doll in one hand, her legs dangling from the saddle. The child's innocence was so bright against the ruin of the station that it pierced Abigail like sunlight through a shutter. The man glanced up at his daughter and gave a small nod. "She'll be all right, Daisy," he said. "We'll see to her." The little girl rummaged in a small pouch by the saddle horn and drew out a piece of biscuit, holding it out with her small hand. "She can have mine," Daisy said. Her voice was earnest, without hesitation. Abigail's breath caught. Her pride could stand against a man's pity, but against a child's gift, it crumbled like dry earth. She lifted a trembling hand and accepted the biscuit. It was hard, crumbling at the edges, and as she bit into it, her tears fell unchecked. She covered her mouth with her hand, ashamed of her own sobs, but Daisy smiled at her as though the act of sharing had already mended something. The man stood, offering his hand. "Come," he said simply. "You'll ride with us." Her instinct was to refuse, to cling to the ragged remains of her independence. "I can walk," she murmured. "You can't," he replied, his tone calm but leaving no room for her protest. He lifted her easily, his strength sure but not rough, and placed her carefully in the saddle before him. Daisy shifted happily to make room, and Abigail found herself pressed between the two, the man's arm steady behind her, the little girl's dull brushing against her sleeve. They turned away from the abandoned station, hooves striking the dry earth, and the forgotten place shrank into the distance. The road home was long, stretching across plains baked by the sun. The air shimmered above the grass, and cicadas hummed endlessly, their song filling the spaces where words might have been. Abigail slumped against the man's shoulder, too weak to hold herself upright for long. She caught fragments of the child's chatter, questions about her shoes, her hair, whether she liked dolls, whether she liked singing. Each innocent curiosity was like a thread tugging at Abigail's heart, weaving her into a fabric she had not known she wanted to belong to. She answered in whispers, surprising herself with small smiles at the child's eagerness. The man said little, but she could feel his quiet watchfulness in every movement. His arm steadied her without pressing, and though his silence was weighty, it was not cold. In that silence, Abigail felt something she had not known in years, a strange, fragile safety. Yet as they drew closer to the edge of town, she saw faces turn toward them. Women paused in their sweeping, men leaned from doorways, children whispered. Their eyes cut sharp as blades, weighing her torn dress, her hollow cheeks, her place between the cowboy and his daughter. She heard the murmurs drift like wind. Who's she? Picked her up off the street. A fallen woman, surely. Shame burned her skin hotter than the sun. She wanted to slide down, to flee before their judgment crushed her. Her voice broke. I shouldn't be here. Take me no further. The man's voice was quiet but firm. You'll come home with me. Let the tongues wag. They'll tire of it. His eyes did not flinch from hers, though she could not hold them long. Daisy, oblivious to the whispers, pressed closer and wrapped small fingers around Abigail's hand. Don't go away, the child said. The words rooted Abigail where shame would have driven her off. The ranch came into sight, framed by split-rail fences and the shimmer of heat rising from fields. It was not grand, but there was a plain dignity in its lines, in the way the potch boards were swept, the tools stacked neatly by the barn. The air carried the scent of hay and distant cattle. He helped her down, guiding her into a spare room inside the house. It was bare but clean, with a bedspread mended in places and a window that let the light fall warm across the floor. Abigail touched the quilt with trembling hands, ashamed to soil it with her weary body. Yet Daisy appeared again, clutching a small bunch of wildflowers she had plucked from near the yard. She thrust them into Abigail's hand with a shy smile. For you, she said. Abigail felt her throat close as she whispered, Thank you. Life in the days that followed was marked not by grand gestures, but by the smallest acts of grace. Abigail, though still weak, rose to help with dishes, folded linens, and swept floors. Daisy's laughter filled the house, chasing away the silence that had once ruled it. The man walked outside, fixing a broken fence, mending tack, his figure steady against the horizon. Sometimes Abigail caught him glancing her way, not with the gaze of a man weighing a woman's worth, but with something quieter, something she dared not name. At night, she sat by the window, staring at stars that seemed too far for her prayers to reach. One evening, she heard his boots approach. Without a word, he draped his coat over her shoulders, the warmth of it shocking her almost as much as the tenderness. She turned her face away, tears blurring the constellations. You don't owe me anything, she whispered. His voice was low, carrying like a murmur across still water. You don't owe me a story, but you don't have to starve alone. In the morning, Daisy's voice pierced her defenses further. The child burst into the room, arms flung wide, calling, Mama. Abigail froze. I'm not, she began, but Daisy cut her off with stubborn joy. But my heart says you are. Abigail sank to her knees, clutching the little girl, torn between guilt and an aching sweetness. To be wanted was more terrifying than to be forgotten. She pressed her lips to Daisy's hair, trembling. In the doorway, the man stood silently, his face shadowed. He said nothing, but something in his stillness told her he had heard. Days passed, and Abigail grew stronger. Yet inside her, shame and gratitude warred. She told herself she could not stay, not when the town whispered, not when she brought a shadow over their good name. She packed her few things quietly, intending to slip away. But as she stepped onto the porch, he was there, as though he had known. The sun fell low, setting the horizon aflame. You mean to leave, he said. I've no right to stay, she whispered, her voice shaking. Your kindness has been more than I deserve. He stepped closer, his eyes steady on hers. Daisy already chose you. I'd be a fool to send you away. Her breath caught, and she shook her head. I am broken, Asha. The town calls me shameful. Let them call what they will, he said. I have watched you rise from hunger and hold my child with more love than this world has shown you. You've more strength than any of them who whisper behind closed doors. His hand reached into his pocket, drawing out a simple silver ring, worn by years but polished clean. He held it between them, not as a command but as an offering. Abigail, I don't want you here as charity. I want you as my partner. Will you stay, not because you must, but because you are wanted? Her eyes blurred with tears. The words she had starved for all her life were here, in the quiet truth of his voice. She trembled, her heart beating faster than it had in years. Daisy appeared at the door, watching with wide eyes, her little hands clasped in hope. Abigail reached out, her fingers brushing the ring. A sob escaped her lips, and then she nodded, unable to speak. He slid the ring onto her finger, his hand warm around hers. The sun lit them in its fading glow, as though the sky itself bore witness. Daisy squealed with delight, racing forward to clutch both their hands. And so, at the porch of a simple ranch, the woman who had nearly starved to death at an abandoned station found herself feasting at last, on belonging, on love, on the courage to be wanted again. Years later, if one were to tell the tale, they would speak of a cowboy named Asher, his daughter Daisy, and the stranger Abigail who arrived on the brink of death and was reborn into a family. They would whisper that sometimes love does not thunder into our lives but comes softly, through a child's innocent word, through the strength of a man's steady silence, through the fragile heart of a woman learning once more to live. And perhaps the listener, sitting in the dusk of their own life, would take from it the quiet lesson, that a heart starved too long can still be filled, that belonging is the truest bread, and that love, when it comes, is not charity but salvation.